The clock strikes 2 in the morning, and the silence of the room is shattered by the deafening roar of your own mind. A single fleeting worry about tomorrow suddenly accelerates into an unstoppable avalanche of impending doom. Your heart races, your chest tightens, and before you can even take a breath, your brain has already constructed a detailed, terrifying reality where everything falls apart. This is the exhausting, paralyzing grip of the catastrophizing thought cycle, where the mind relentlessly predicts the worst possible outcome. In these desperate moments of mental freefall, the most common advice offered by well-meaning friends is often the most frustrating. Just pray about it. You close your eyes, desperately pleading for the anxiety to stop, asking for an instant removal of the dread. Yet, when you open your eyes, the terror remains, often feeling louder than before. The simple act of prayer seems to fail, leaving you feeling spiritually inadequate and mentally exhausted. You are left wondering why a faithful plea for peace cannot silence the storm. To understand this disconnect, we must look beneath the surface of our spiritual intentions and examine the biological architecture of fear. Deep within the temporal lobe lies the amygdala, the brain's primitive threat detection center. When a catastrophizing thought enters your awareness, the amygdala perceives it not as a hypothetical scenario, but as a present life-threatening danger. It immediately floods your nervous system with cortisol and adrenaline, effectively shutting down the logical, reasoning centers of your brain. This intense physiological reaction is known as an amygdala hijack. During this hijacked state, your brain is entirely consumed by survival, making it nearly impossible to process calm, rational thought. The psychological framework of cognitive behavioral therapy identifies this specific distortion as CBT, catastrophizing. It is a deeply ingrained cognitive error where the mind automatically magnifies a minor setback into an unrecoverable disaster. Because your neural pathways are blazing with alarm signals, a passive request for relief simply cannot penetrate the biological noise. The brain is screaming fire, and a quiet wish for water is not enough to extinguish the flames. Ancient biblical wisdom offers a profound solution, but it is frequently misunderstood as a passive surrender. In 1 Peter 5-7, we are instructed to cast all your anxieties on Him because He cares for you. For generations, this has been interpreted as a gentle, effortless handing over of our worries. However, the original Greek language implies a forceful, intentional throwing, a deliberate and active separation of the burden from the bearer. It is not a magical eraser for anxiety, but a rigorous, intentional command. The gap between passive wishing and this active casting is where true mental transformation occurs. When we merely ask for bad feelings to go away, we leave the underlying catastrophizing narrative unchallenged. The amygdala does not respond to suppression. It responds to new evidence. If we do not actively dismantle the terrifying story our brain is inventing, the physiological alarm will continue to ring. We must shift our approach, recognizing that true peace requires our active participation in the theater of the mind. This brings us to a powerful intersection where modern clinical psychology meets ancient spiritual discipline. The secular practice of thought challenging requires you to examine your fears, demand evidence for their validity, and construct a more realistic narrative. This mirrors the profound biblical command found in 2 Corinthians 10-5, which instructs us to take every thought captive to obey Christ. Both frameworks demand that we stop being passive victims of our inner dialogue and step into the role of an authoritative gatekeeper. We must begin reframing prayer as an active cognitive tool rather than a passive request for relief. Instead of simply begging for the anxiety to stop, we use prayer as a structured environment to interrogate our fears in the presence of divine truth. You bring the specific, catastrophic story your brain has woven directly into the light, laying it out piece by piece. You ask yourself and your Creator what is actually true in this moment, deliberately separating the facts from the spiral of catastrophic fiction. The moment you begin to question the validity of your catastrophic thoughts, a profound biological shift begins to take place. By forcing yourself to articulate the fear, analyze its likelihood, and counter it with objective truth, you are pulling blood flow away from the panicked amygdala. You are actively re-engaging your prefrontal cortex, the logical, executive center of your brain. This cognitive reframing acts as a neurological brake system, slowly bringing the runaway train of your anxiety to a manageable halt. As the executive center comes back online, the suffocating grip of the worst-case scenario begins to loosen. The racing heart slows, the tightened chest expands, and a sliver of genuine clarity pierces through the fog of dread. You realize that the disaster your mind predicted was not a prophecy, but merely a distorted projection. The relief that washes over you is not the result of a magical disappearance of trouble, but the hard-won victory of facing a falsehood and dismantling it with the truth. Every time you engage in this deliberate process, you are leveraging the incredible power of neuroplasticity. Your brain is not a static organ. It is continuously reshaping itself based on your repeated mental habits. When you interrupt a catastrophic spiral and force a logical, faith-based evaluation of the thought, you weaken the old neural pathways of panic. Simultaneously, you are forging brand new connections of resilience and clarity, physically altering the landscape of your mind to default toward peace rather than panic. This biological rewiring is the exact mechanism behind the biblical concept of the renewing of the mind, as described in Romans 12:2. Spiritual transformation is not merely a mystical event that happens to us. It is a collaborative process that requires our sustained effort. God designed our brains with the capacity for profound change, giving us the biological machinery to partner with His truth. The sanctification of our thoughts is a daily, structural rebuild of our cognitive architecture. Developing this habit requires treating the act of casting cares as a rigorous mental workout rather than a momentary plea. Just as physical exercise strengthens the body, cognitive and spiritual discipline strengthens the mind. When the familiar whisper of doom begins, you must not ignore it or simply pray for it to vanish. You must actively confront it, utilizing the tools of thought, challenging to dissect the lie, and anchoring your renewed perspective in the unwavering promises of Scripture. In practical terms, this means your prayers during a crisis will sound vastly different. Instead of saying, "Lord, please make this awful feeling stop," your prayer becomes an active cognitive tool. You might say, "Lord, my brain is telling me that I am going to lose everything tomorrow, but I know this is a distortion. I am taking this specific fear captive, examining it against your provision, and choosing to focus on the reality of this present moment." This is the precise execution of cognitive reframing within a spiritual context. When you stop treating prayer as an emergency escape hatch and start using it as a surgical instrument, the entire trajectory of your mental health changes. You no longer fear the onset of anxiety because you know you have the exact tools required to dismantle it. The catastrophizing cycle loses its terrifying authority over your day. You begin to walk with a quiet, unshakable confidence, knowing that while you cannot control every thought that enters your mind, you hold absolute dominion over which thoughts are allowed to stay. Over time, the shadow of past thought patterns still lingers, but it no longer dictates your reality. The brain's pathways, once fixed on predicting disaster, now offer a new route to peace. You will find that the initial spark of worry fails to ignite the massive forest fire of panic it once did. Your baseline state of mind shifts from chronic apprehension to a grounded, realistic optimism. This is the beautiful, tangible result of faithfully applying both clinical insight and divine wisdom to your inner world. In this newfound clarity, a profound realization takes root deep within your soul. You are not the sum of your intrusive thoughts, nor are you a helpless victim to the biological alarms of your nervous system. You are the imago Dei, created in the image of God, endowed with a brilliant mind capable of logic, reason, and profound faith. You have been given a spirit of power, love, and a sound mind, fully equipped to govern the internal landscape of your consciousness. With this rightful authority reclaimed, you begin to experience the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, as promised in Philippians 4-7. This peace is not a fragile emotion dependent on perfect circumstances. It is a robust, neurological guard stationed at the gateway of your heart and mind. It stands resilient against the onslaught of hypothetical disasters, filtering out the noise of the amygdala and allowing only truth to inform your deepest sense of self. Integrating this into your everyday life means embracing a continuous active partnership with both your biology and your creator. When the news headlines scream disaster or a financial setback looms, you do not revert to passive panic. You immediately deploy your cognitive tools, challenging the catastrophic narrative, taking the fear captive, and actively casting the burden through intentional, truth-seeking prayer. You become a master architect of your own peace, actively building structures of resilience with every conscious thought. This is the lifelong journey of sanctification, where the mind is continually refined and purified from the distortions of fear. You move from being a ship tossed violently by the waves of every passing anxiety to an anchor resting securely on the bedrock of truth. The integration of therapeutic insight and biblical command ceases to be a mere concept. It becomes the very rhythm of your daily existence. You are actively participating in the divine restoration of your own mind. You have the power to transform the way you process fear, stepping out of the shadows of worst-case scenarios and into the brilliant light of intentional, truth-filled living. The sanctified mind is built precisely here, in the courageous space where we refuse to let our biology dictate our destiny, choosing instead to actively wield the wisdom of Scripture and the science of the brain. The path to lasting mental clarity is not found in a passive request for relief, but in the triumphant daily practice of taking every thought captive.